Welcome everyone. Today we are going to be painting houseplants, nature at home. So I invite you to look around your space and find some plants and leaves that are really interesting to you. There are so many different shapes and textures and shades of green that we can paint. We're going to paint a polka dot plant with some pink, the jade plant with a little bit of red, and this mother of millions with a little bit of cerulean blue, all mixed in with sap green. So this is a really fun one. You can look around your home, find plants that are wanting to be models. The grown ones look like Mexican hats with little baby plants all the way around the rim. They're so sweet. I got this one from a friend. And really study them, look at the leaves, really enjoy the texture, the shape, use your observational skills. This is really a practice in presence and learning to experience the art of seeing. All right, let's dive in. This is the first one we're going to paint, the Polka-Dot Plant study. I painted this with a reference of the polka-dot plant that I actually have. I forgot it at the studio, so we're just going to be referencing my reference today, and that's okay. For this one, we're going to be using sap green, indanthrone blue, and quinacridone rose, with a little bit of white gouache in here to make that rose nice and milky color. And after that, we're going to paint the mother of millions. I have a little baby here that I'm referencing, the mother plant again. She's at the studio, so we're referencing my reference that I've painted for this one. And then we're going to be painting this jade plant. And for that one, we're going to be also doing a value scale, showing how we can get these nice deep greens, these warm greens mixing sap green and alizarin crimson. So those are the only two colors that we're going to be using for the jade plant. For the mother of millions, we're going to be using cerulean blue and sap green. And this is the little jade plant that I'm referencing for today. The brushes that we're mainly going to be using are a round number 1 and a round number 6. The paper that I'm using is cold press watercolor paper, which I have taped down using this art quality masking tape. I've got a scrap piece of paper here that I'm going to be using to do swatches, and I like to cut a lot of them in advance so that I've got a few different ones here that I can always test my colors out with. So for this polka dot plant, the very first thing that I'm going to be doing is mixing the sap green. So I put a little bit of water in, I break up my pigment, and I make a little mixing pile right beside it. And make sure that I have enough water that it's nice and juicy. I don't want my paint to be dry. When I'm putting it on the paper, I want it to stay wet long enough that I can move it around a little bit. So this is what I'm going to be referencing. So it's kind of like an oval with a pointed tip, and there's a spine. So the first thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be kind of dotting in the spine and dotting in the veins and the outline, and then I'll let it dry and put in the pink. All right, so let's go. Actually, I'm going to add a little bit of indanthrone blue to this so that it's a darker green. There we go. And I like to twist my tip a little bit. So if you twist it, then you get that nice sharp tip. So it's kind of like you pull and you twist. Making sure to keep your pressure nice and steady and light. No tension. Because tension can transfer through your brush into your paint. So I'm just basically putting in the shape, and then I start to create some space within it by adding little dots. So I don't want it to dry too fast. So I'm working pretty quickly and staggering the dots that end up forming the veins, because that's what I've noticed in the plant itself. It's a little bit staggered. And then keep reloading as it dries up. This is just going to be the bottom layer. We're going to put a few different layers on. Now, if you notice a polka dot plant, sometimes they're red, sometimes they're white within the green. I got so excited when I saw this pink one. I had to have it. So I adopted her and she came home with me. Okay, so it's kind of like that. Now I'm going to let her dry. Now I'm going to let the leaf dry, and I'm going to start mixing some of the pink. So make sure that you're getting enough of the color off. So I like to just dip it and press it into the paper towel until it gets a little bit like clear enough, until it gets clear enough. Now I'm going to mix a little bit of this white gouache here. Get some water, really break it up, and then a little bit of this rose. See how nice and creamy and light that is? It might be a bit too dark, depending on which plants you're referring to. I'm just going to add a little bit more white. Okay, I like that. So now I'm going to dot this pink where the white is. You can overlap some of the green. Make sure you reload your brush often. Now, if you notice, this is quite pale in comparison to my reference image. It's quite dark, so I'm going to add a little bit more indanthrone blue to my sap green, really deepen that color. A little bit of indanthrone blue. That's a bit too much, but I'm going to add some sap green just to the edge. A little bit more pigment. Ooh, you can really see how the sap green is heavier than the indanthrone blue. It's pushing it away. So I'm going to test out my color here. I like that. Now I'm going to go in and put another layer just inside the green. So I'm going to allow a little bit of the light green to show through. I'm just kind of dotting it. My paper is a little bit damp, which is actually creating an interesting texture. Now I'm going to reinforce the outer edge a little bit. And the dots are going to be more on the inside. Okay, that's pretty much it. I think I'm going to let that dry for a bit. And then I'll come back and I'll do another layer of pink. The next one I'm going to do is the Mother of Millions. So this is my little baby plant, but I'm actually going to be referencing this one right here. It's got a few of these little babies on the tips, which are so cute. I'll try to find a Google image and attach it to this video so that you can have a reference of what else is possible. So for this one, I actually add a little bit of cerulean blue to the sap green. That's a bit too green, so I'm going to add a bit more blue. I like that. A little bit more blue. Okay, that's great. And I'm going to dilute this a little bit. So what's interesting about this plant is that it's got these jagged edges, almost like a sawtooth. So I'm going to be painting it in the direction of those jagged edges. And I'm going to allow a little bit of lightness in here, maybe add a bit of white gouache just to make it a bit creamy, because this particular leaf does have almost like a powdery light blue to it. I'll just reference this one actually no, I'm going to reference the one in front of me here. Okay, so basically it's also kind of an oval shape. So I'm just going to imagine my jagged edges coming out. Actually, maybe I'll start at the tip. So it just kind of starts at that tip, and then it just starts to kind of come down. Take your time with it. Actually, I prefer it to be a bit more of an oval, so I'm going to kind of start over a little bit here. I want it to be more of an oval shape. So I'm just going to push that out with a little bit of water so that it doesn't dry up. Now this is probably going to be where the spine is. So I'm just going to put that in there and allow a little bit of white space just for some interest. Now before this dries, I'm going to push the paint out. That works better because it's nice and wet, and when my brush lifts off right here, it creates a little pool which adds a little more color, and on the real leaf, that's where there's a shadow, so it works out well like that. Just going over it again while it's nice and damp, and it's giving, the watercolor itself is giving me the impression of a shadow without me having to do much work at all. And I'm just allowing that water to do its magic. So I'm going to wet my brush again, and then I'm going to shape this side. And before it dries, I'm just going to add some water in there really quickly. I don't want a line to be here, so I'm moving kind of quick for that. Okay, I'll add a little bit more blue. And then I'll start to make my little sawtooths, the little edges for the mother of millions babies to grow off of. Last week we painted birds in flight, which was so lovely because they represented light and motion and freedom. And today is feeling so much like fall, which is a really lovely time for us to go into stillness and presence. Having houseplants keeps it cozy and warm inside over the winter. Okay, so I'm going to just bring in a little bit more shadow along this edge here. Maybe right here too. And right here where the spine starts to curve. Okay, so the next part of this leaf, which is super fun, is adding the little babies. And the little babies are a little bit darker, so I'm going to actually go into the sap green here that's already nice and dark from my previous leaf, and I'm going to start carefully adding in little babies. Now, these little babies grow in twos. Some of them fall off, some of them stay, but I'm just adding a little extra dark here, a little extra shadow for the ones that are still there. I'm just kind of winging it at this point because I've studied this plant in my studio and I know that it's quite random. Some of them have a lot of the little babies and some of them have barely any. And if you look at the babies, like the little ones, they don't have any yet. They have to grow a certain size first for them to start growing mothers, or for them to be mothers and have babies. You know, sometimes you see these straight on and sometimes you see them from the side where they look, you can see the two of them. So that's pretty much it. It's a really simple, sweet plant. So let's just keep it nice and simple. Maybe I'll deepen some of these shadows here. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that. And I really like how the cerulean blue separates from the sap green and causes this granulation. Actually, if you find that it's a little bit of a stark contrast, you can always add a little bit of water and soften it up and let some of this lightness show through, which creates a little extra interest. as you experiment, you're going to get more comfortable with this. And it becomes so much more intuitive. Right now, I'm just kind of riffing based on what I'm seeing here and just having fun with it. Okay, so I'm going to leave that one. Now this one is looking a little bit dark, so I'm going to go into Revive this pink, and I'm just going to put a little bit of this pink on top of the green just to brighten it up a little bit more. It is a polka dot plant, so you can have a lot of fun with just making these little polka dots. It wants to be dotted, not have actual brush strokes so much. I'm going to add a bit more white to really brighten up this part here. And I think I'm going to leave it. And see what happens. Okay. Now the last plant that we're going to do is the jade plant. Now, as you can see, it's got some really light greens. It's got some deep, earthy, warm greens. It's got more of a jade green. And then it's got these deep red burgundy edges. You can even see here, you can see those little edges. And so we'll do a couple of leaves, maybe 3 leaves where you can see that variety. And another thing to notice is the texture. Before I paint a leaf, I like to touch the texture and get a feel for what it is that I'm seeing. What am I feeling? What am I observing here? And so this one has a lot of dots. You can see in the reflection how it's kind of pockmarked. It's got a really interesting texture, and they're thick and rubbery. Whereas the polka dot plant is very, very fine and thin. It's very delicate. And the mother of millions is also kind of thick and rubbery and has a very matte texture. So it doesn't glare the same way. It doesn't hold light glare the same way that the jade plant does. And so to represent this, I'm going to leave the paper white. I'm going to, wherever I see glare, I'm going to leave the paper white, and I'm going to dot into it. Okay, so the first thing that I do for the jade plant is I start with 1 leaf. So I'm going to start with a leaf that's closest to me, and then I'm going to do the ones that are a bit farther away. I really want my paint to be watery. I'm going to actually start with just a plain sap green for now, just so that it's nice and light and I can build on top of that. So I'll start with 1 little leaf, which is really just an oval. It's a very simple oval. And I'm going to make sure that I leave some area where I see the glare. I might as well paint the other 2 leaves just so that I can see the shape in relation to each other. This one is a little glare more on the tip. And then this one is kind of more upwards from the side. So the glare is mostly right here in the center. And then there's one just in the back, right behind it. A little bit bigger than the other two. And this one has glare here and here. Okay. Now, the next part I'm going to do is put on wherever I see the darkest green. So I'm going to add, this is a green that I mixed here with a bit of indanthrone blue. I'm going to add crimson. I'm going to show you why I'm going to add crimson here in a moment. So you might be wondering, how do I know to add red? So if you look at the color wheel, there are complementary colors, which are those opposite on the color wheel. Now, complementary colors help to guide you in what color to add to create a shadow. And so in this case, I'll show you what I mean. I'll do a simple value scale. So I've got red on one side, and I'm just going to make a little mixing pile here for red. And then I've got sap green on the other side. Now I'm going to add a little bit of green to the red, and look what happens. Then I add a little bit more green to the red. And it gets dark. So here I'm going to add a little bit more green to the red so you can see the transition properly. So this is like it's a deeper, almost like a burgundy brown red, and then you add a bit more green and it becomes a really warm, beautiful green like that. And so because I do so many value scales and I get to know how colors behave together, then I know that to make a deeper green, all I do is I add red. So if I want red to be darker, I add green. If I want green to be darker, I add red. Okay, so I'm just going to go in here and revive this because I left it for a moment. Now I see in this little area here, it's actually quite light. So I'm just going to add a light green that I have on hand. It's almost bluish. So I am going to add just a tiny bit of a blue in there. I'm going to add water to my brush to revive these leaves here. So there's no lines. And I'll do the same over here. I'm just adding a bit of water to my brush and some texture to bring this paint back to life. And now I'm going to just dot in where the highlights are, so I can give the impression of texture there. I'm just going to soften these edges with some water because I was talking and I let it dry by accident. Just a little bit of friction brings that paint to life. Okay. Now I'm going to add some of the dark green. and just dot it in there and let it move naturally. On this side as well. Just putting in some shadow. This one here that I'm working on is kind of underneath and behind the other one, so it's going to be the darkest one. Now I'm going to take a little bit of the crimson and really start darkening where I see the red edge. It doesn't really go up here. It starts to disappear there, so I'm not going to go that far, but it does texture in along this edge, so I'm going to make sure I put that in. Okay, and I also see it along this edge here, so I'll just put a little bit of red. And I see it going around the edge over here too, which is nice because it separates these two leaves really well. And I'm just going to dot that in while it's still slightly damp. Reload my brush and do it over here as well. Wherever you see it. I'm not really making this up, I'm just referencing the plant that's in front of me. I don't really see it on this one over here, but I do see it slightly right here. And also a darker green as the leaf starts to bend down. So I'm going to put the shadow here. You can really start to see it coming to life. Now there's quite a glare here that I missed. I covered too much of it up, so I'm going to take a bit of the white gouache and a little bit of green, and I'm just going to put that back in. I'm just going to brighten that edge up slightly. And right here too, just so that it's nice and uniform, congruent. And right here too, because this part I kind of want to paint over it. I want to add a lighter green, so the white gouache will give it a nice base to be able to put some lighter green in there. Okay. And I'm just going to dot in a bit more texture here. And on the edge as it goes into the green. Wherever I see some lightness. Okay, almost there. I'm going to take a little bit of Hansa Yellow Light and a little bit of green, make it limey. So I'm going to put a little bit of this limey green just at the base where the stem is nice and fresh and new. And I'm going to darken this edge right here a little bit more so that there's enough of a contrast between this light edge. And I'm also going to add a bit more contrast over here. Don't be afraid of contrast, it's your friend. It's what helps paintings pop. And if you don't like it, if it's too much, like if that's too much, all I do is I dry my brush and I go in with a dry brush and then I soften it. Just overlapping it, picking up a bit of paint, taking it off on the paper towel, just softening that a little bit. This kind of spread out, so I'm just gonna lift some of that off. Watercolor painting doesn't have to be permanent. Everything is usually pretty fixable. I'm just gonna lighten this edge right here. Maybe add a little bit more white gouache just right here. Bring that glare back out more. Now you can definitely leave the paper white for these parts, but I had gone a bit overboard, so that's why I'm putting it back in. It's all just for fun. Never take yourself too seriously when you're watercolor painting. You'll just be too tense and start judging yourself, and it's impossible to learn like that. Just imagine you're a child and you're learning something new, and give yourself permission to have a learning mind. Okay, I'm going to lift a little bit of this color up. I found it's getting a little bit too dark there, so I'm just going to lift a bit up and then just leave it because the paper's starting to get linty. If the paper gets linty, that is a good indication that you have taken it too far. But I just want to put a bit of shadow back in. There we go. Funny looking, but fun. All right, friends, that's it for this tutorial. I would love to hear how yours went, and if you have any recommendations or requests for future tutorials. If you like this one, make sure you give a follow and subscribe so that you can be first to know about my next one that comes out. Thanks again. See you next time.